Sudan, Africa's third largest country, is currently the site of the world's most severe humanitarian crisis. For nearly 3 years, the civil war has torn the nation apart. Famine has officially been declared in Darfur, Sudan's western region. 21 million people face starvation. Across the country, children are dying from severe malnutrition at rates that have never been seen in years. Humanitarian convoys are blocked at checkpoints. International funding has dried up. 2/3 of Sudan's population will need emergency aid by the end of this year just to survive. This is the story of a land that sees no peace. This is the story of Sudan. Today, Sudan is split down the middle. The Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, control most of the eastern and central parts of the country, including the capital Khartoum and parts of Kordofan. They are led by General Burhan. The western part of Sudan is ruled by the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF for short, a massive paramilitary army commanded by their military leader, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. These two forces were once allies and part of the same power structure during their conflict in Darfur many years ago. Now they are locked in a brutal fight for control. More than 150,000 people have died in the Sudanese war so far. According to the latest UN figures, over 13 million people have been forced to flee their homes. It has become the world's largest displacement crisis. Most of the displaced are still in Sudan. They are struggling to find clean water, food, medical care, and basic supplies to survive. The camps where displaced families now live are severely overcrowded and underfunded. Sanitation is poor, clean water is scarce, and medical care is almost non-existent in many areas. According to recent UNICEF reports, it is estimated that 17.3 million people lack access to basic levels of drinking water, and 24 million lack access to proper sanitation facilities. And then there's the hunger. Ted Chaiban, UNICEF's Deputy Executive Director, says famine and soaring malnutrition rates devastate the country.
More than half of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance, including 14 million children.
Between January and November of last year alone, in North Darfur, roughly one child was treated for severe acute malnutrition every 6 minutes. This winter famine has reached areas of Sudan that were not previously affected by the famine. Both warring parties have been accused of deliberately obstructing humanitarian aid. Humanitarian workers are prevented from reaching the people who need their help the most. Repeated attempts at negotiating ceasefires have collapsed, and large areas of the country remain effectively cut off from the outside world. Humanitarian agencies are therefore unable to assess the true scale of suffering in those regions. And this is further fueling the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. And as if the humanitarian strain weren't enough for the Sudanese people, there is always the constant threat of violence by armed forces. This can be seen in the life of Mayar Badr al-Din, a 7-year-old. She has been living in a displacement camp in Port Sudan since early 2024. Mayar fled Khartoum with her family shortly after the war broke out. She remembers vividly when RSF arrived. Her home and nearby stores were blown up as they tried to leave.
When we were in Khartoum, things were good. But then the RSF came and the war broke out. I was scared when the RSF arrived. I remember how when we went to leave the city, they blew up our houses and stores.
Mawahib Hamid is Mayar's mother. She hid under the bed with her children as grenades were exploding. The doors shook around them. More than 10 men she knew, including her uncle and her cousin's husbands, lost their lives.
This is my brother, Abu Ubaida. I miss him very much. I haven't heard from him for a long time. I miss him so much. I miss all my brothers.
RSF has been accused of war crimes since the beginning of the armed conflicts. They seized the city of El Fasher in October of last year, a city with 1 million people, who are now cut off from the rest of the world. No way out, no food, no water, no medicine. The IRC estimated that nearly 250,000 people were trapped inside the city. El Fasher is a key city in the Darfur region, and this is where some of the most haunting narratives have surfaced. Nadra Ahmed tried to escape this hell. 7 months pregnant, she walked 25 miles through RSF-controlled territory with her children to reach the Al-Daba camp in northern Sudan. And she did this while carrying one child on her back. Days later, the attack struck the area she fled. Nadra is one of over 140 pregnant women estimated to be sheltering in the camp.
أنا لما مرضت وأنا حامل بطفلي ده تعب شديد لدرجة خيالي وأنا شايلة الطفل في ظهري تاني الطفل ده في بطني ولسه هضرب فكر عيني.
The UN said RSF and allied Arab militia carried out widespread attacks, including mass killings, summary executions, sexual violence, abductions, and torture. The RSF have denied these claims. ABC News correspondent Ian Pannell spent weeks in Sudan. He reported that crimes can be seen from space. Satellite imagery shows clusters of charred vehicles. It's a graveyard of families who tried to flee the city. On the ground, the rebel RSF fighters walked through university halls filled with bodies. They filmed their victories on cell phones and broadcasted massacres to a world that was not watching. In the war opening months, the RSF were accused of committing the worst atrocities. Human Rights Watch documented systemic attacks on the Masalit and other non-Arab communities. Sexual violence has continuously been used as a weapon of war. Mariam is a woman in her mid-20s who asked to remain anonymous. She spoke with DW correspondent Maria Müller. Mariam was on her way to work in the north of Khartoum in June 2023 when she was abducted by men in RSF uniforms. She was held captive for over a year alongside 9 other women in a small room. She said 5 RSF fighters sexually assaulted her every day. They drugged her through her water, beat her, and cut her with a knife. Her body, she said, is covered in scars. She was only freed when the Sudanese Armed Forces entered the north of Khartoum in October 2024. She now lives in guarded housing with the other survivors. Mariam and millions of other survivors are struggling to find medical care. The war has shattered Sudan's infrastructure. Over 70% of hospitals have been destroyed or forced to close and are struggling to reopen. Diseases are spreading rapidly. Cholera has reached every state in the country. Malaria, dengue, and measles are surging in camps where people live packed together. But how could the situation turn so dire with so little media attention around the world? To understand the war in Sudan, we have to go back a few years. Sudan is one of Africa's most diverse nations. There are over 500 ethnic groups, hundreds of languages, and vastly different ways of life. Those who identify as Arab live primarily in the north of Sudan. Historically, they have held most of the political power. non-Arab African ethnic groups in Darfur, the Nuba Mountains, and outlying regions have been struggling to get their voices heard on the political stage. This division has been exploited for years by various political leaders. For 3 decades, Sudan was ruled by Omar al-Bashir. He is a military dictator accused of genocide, war crimes, and corruption. Bashir comes from an Arab background and filled the government and military with elites from Arab tribes. Hundreds of diverse African ethnic groups in the outlying regions were systematically pushed aside. In 2003, that marginalization ignited a rebellion in Darfur. They demanded autonomy and a fair share of the region's resources. President Omar al-Bashir's response was ruthless. Instead of negotiating, he launched an ethnic cleansing campaign. Government forces and allied Arab militia, called the Janjaweed, targeted Darfur, Masalit, and Sagawa communities. Nearly 400,000 people were killed. Villages were burned, and women were sexually assaulted. The international community agreed that ethnic groups were directly targeted by militia groups as a means of political domination. 9 years later, those same Janjaweed militias were incorporated into a new militia group, the RSF. By 2019, the Sudanese people had enough. Massive protests swept the country. Millions took to the street, demanding the end of corruption. Both SAF and RSF turned on Bashir. Protesters won, and Bashir was overthrown on the 11th of April, 2019. The generals promised a transition to democracy, even though they had violently dispersed a sitting protest in Khartoum that following summer. A power-sharing agreement was signed in August 2019. Half the transitional government would be civilian, and the other half would be military. For Sudan, it was a moment of hope. But the military never intended to follow through. Over the next 2 years, Burhan and Hemeti systemically undermined civilian authority. Then on October 25th in 2021, soldiers surrounded the homes of civilian leaders. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok was detained. The military declared a state of emergency. The coup was condemned by the international community. The World Bank froze aid, and multiple countries suspended assistance. Sudan's democracy was over before it began. Soon after the coup, the two generals realized that neither of them wanted to give up power, so they turned on each other. Burhan wanted to merge the RSF into the regular army, which he controlled. Hemeti controlled a massive gold-funded financial empire and thousands of loyal fighters. He pushed for a 10-year timeline to protect his autonomy. The disagreement escalated into an armed conflict. In April 2023, Sudan descended into civil war. As the war has waged on for almost 3 years, the outcome of the war and the future of the country has been on the mind of more actors than just the Sudanese people. But what makes Sudan such a lucrative proposition on the world stage? Sudan sits on one of the most strategically important regions in the world. It borders the Red Sea, which is a critical route for global trade. Control of these checkpoints can have a monumental effect on the world's economy, as seen by the recent developments in the Strait of Hormuz. The River Nile also flows through the country, and with increased water insecurity in the region, along with strained relationships between Egypt and Ethiopia over water flow from the river, control of water flow has proven to be a key political talking point and might turn out into a greater issue in the near future. Egypt, being Sudan's northern neighbor, also has a vested interest in the conflict. The nation, who has a long history of being involved in the geopolitical landscape of Sudan, fears what happens if the state collapses entirely. Over 1 million Sudanese refugees have already crossed into Egypt, and complete state collapse would send millions more. 2/3 of the Sudanese refugees in Egypt are women and children, many of them struggling to find adequate housing, healthcare, employment, and education. Egypt has been accused of supporting the SAF in this conflict, who they allegedly see as the sitting government. Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the sitting leader of SAF, has had frequent visits to the country and was even there as recently as December 2025. The RSF also received support for their role in the conflict. The United Arab Emirates has been accused by Sudanese officials aligned with the SAF of supporting the RSF with weaponry and funding, which has resulted in a direct loss of civilian lives. The matter has been escalated to the United Nations Top Court of violating the Genocide Convention, the International Court of Justice in The Hague. A genocide is being committed against the ethnic group of the Masilat in the west of our country, Sudan's acting Justice Minister, Muawi Usman, said at The Hague. He alleged that a genocide was being carried out by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces with the support and complicity of the United Arab Emirates. The UAE have denied these claims. When most of the oil reserves in Sudan were transferred to South Sudan in 2011, gold became Sudan's most valuable resource. Both armies are now fighting to control it. After 2017, much of the gold deposits and production is under the control of Hemeti and the RSF, which has been crucial in funding his war plan. Jabil Amir gold mines in the north of Darfur have for decades been a strategic point of interest for various militia groups and tribes in the region, and are now in the hands of RSF. The RSF has, through various smuggling networks, sold its gold to multiple countries in the surrounding regions. The UAE remains one of the primary destinations of Africa's gold, and is, due to its lax tax laws, one of the most booming gold markets in the world. Since the start of the war, there have been multiple attempts at ceasefires. All have failed, and peace talks have gone nowhere. In late 2025, diplomatic coalitions announced that they were close to a deal. Both sides gave preliminary approval. Burhan, the SAF leader, rejected it. Fighting escalated on the ground. There will be no ceasefire or reconciliation in Sudan until the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces surrender, SAF General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan said in recent briefings. The conflict therefore has no end in sight, as both armies receive foreign weapons and backing. War becomes more than just a tool to exert political power. It allows the armies to capture territory, extract resources, and keep civilians out of power. A breakthrough will require cutting off the arms and holding the countries involved more accountable. The international community has shown little will to do that. Meanwhile, the war is starting to destabilize not only Sudan, but the entire region. Chad has taken over 800,000 Sudanese refugees, straining a country already facing its own internal conflict. There has been a long-standing concern that the refugee camps have been used as a recruitment grounds for Chadian and Sudanese rebel groups who target boys as young as 9 to become child soldiers in multiple armed conflicts in the region. South Sudan is barely recovering from its own civil war. It now hosts another 800,000 Sudanese refugees. The influx has overwhelmed local resources and reignited ethnic tensions in border areas. Damaged oil pipelines cost millions to repair every single day. Their economy shrank by 30% in 2025 alone. As disease prevention and hygiene has been strained during the conflict, diseases are now spreading and spilling across borders. neighbors like Egypt and Ethiopia are now scrambling to stop the spread. Weapons and mercenaries are flown across porous borders, bringing lawlessness and the high risk of new wars to the entire region. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said if the war doesn't end, we can only expect the worst to come. 3 years into this conflict, international attention has largely shifted elsewhere. But for the millions of Sudanese, the crisis continues. Famine spreads, the war grinds on, and so does their suffering. There's many reasons to call it the forgotten war. Many powerful countries are secretly involved in the fighting to protect their own interests, turning a local struggle into a massive proxy war. Because the media often portrays it as just another distant conflict, global leaders have failed to provide the same attention or funding given to other conflicts. This neglect has left millions of Sudanese people to survive on their own. The future of Sudan and its people may largely depend on the world's willfulness to help. Thank you very much for watching my video. It's on a topic that I felt is very underreported and underdocumented, strangely underreported, I would say even. But I will leave it with this. In life, any step taken in order to help your fellow man can never be a misstep. Can never be a misstep. So with that, until next time, take care of yourselves.